still waiting on engine parts for the 2J mower, so that means it's drift trike time again. So we'll start with the front end. I'll get this engine up higher and then kind of figure out where I want the forks to mount. But the first step is going to be making a steering tube like this that accepts the same bearings and everything that's not aluminum, because I do not want to have to make the whole chassis out of aluminum. Take some measurements, find a piece of steel, and then go to town on the lathe. So I went looking around and I found a piece that is larger in diameter than these races, and that's this giant hunk of solid stock. Weighs probably like 40 pounds. And obviously, to bore out a chunk the size of this whole stem and then turn down the outside, bore out the inside, do the bearing races, that would take approximately all day. My thought is I'm going to make 2 end pieces for the bearing race, and then I'll use this 1 inch or 1.5 inch 120 wall tubing for the middle part, because it doesn't need any sort of races or anything. It just goes, you know, over this shaft, which is much smaller in diameter. And I'll bore them to just this size and press them onto this shaft, weld them on, and then I'll put it back in the lathe and bore them out so that they're more accurate that way. Because obviously welding stuff tends to warp it.
So we call this monster the Loud for obvious reasons, but it is well worth it.
Yeah, so this is a piece of what, I don't know, 2 inch diameter solid, 2 1/4 solid stock. So here we go, Loud. Look at that.
Like butter.
Like freaking butter. Well, I just spent most of the day making a really time-consuming dumbbell. The steering column thing is more or less done. I got the bearing races in there, got the 2 caps welded onto the middle piece. Now bearings go in there like that. And time to see if it works. So this goes on here, fits nice onto that bearing, and then this goes right like that. Oh yeah, that's nice.
We're going to take a quick break by the donor car of this operation to talk about the sponsor of this video, Cove Audio, and specifically the Commuter 2. Now this speaker has super long battery life. We jam in the garage all day with it. It connects to your phone over Bluetooth. It's super simple. And best of all, splits in 2. You got 2 different speakers, surround sound in the garage, and they get super loud. Check this out. Pretty rad. Now Cove is doing a special offer for you guys while supplies last. Just go to coveaudio.com/grind68 and you'll save 68% on this speaker. So make sure you click that link in our description, use promo code GRIND68. Definitely check that out. Now let's get back to Rotary Trike.
And now we have the first part of our drift trike chassis. Not really, but you know, the first part for things to attach to. We had Sam pick up this rear subframe from an Audi A6 this morning. We got the whole setup, axles, brakes, subframe, diff, all of it, and it's actually surprisingly light for what it is. It's also got already double A-arm suspension, which is ideal for what we're doing. Spins the wrong way for this diff, which is a problem we've run into before when we built the kernel. So basically the output of this engine spins this way, and if you spin this diff that way, you're going backward. So that's not good, which means the easiest solution for that is to flip the diff upside down. And of course there's downsides to that, but this diff can probably handle way more power than we need to put through it for this application, so shouldn't be a problem. The original subframe is gone, and we're working on building a new one. Well, actually, this is all just placeholders to hold this together in exactly the orientation that it should be, so we can figure out the new diff mounts and where everything goes, and then we can get this whole assembly in position behind the engine and trans, and then start making a chassis that attaches to it. Ready to make my first piece of chassis here. I think I'm going to make most of it out of 1.5" tubing because that's what we have, and I think it'll look nice. So I'm thinking I'll run one kind of something like this. It'll come straight back from the top of the steering column there, come over, come down, and then back and tie into the transmission here with a nice bracket. And then I'll also bring in a couple down to the bottom of the tube here and then do some trellising here, which will look super cool and be super duper strong, which is what we need, because this thing's beefy. Time to bust out the Rogue Fab bender, which I haven't used in a minute, which brings me to another point, which is we're giving one of these away. So head over to our website, check out the details. Every $5 you spend on merch gets you an entry to win your very own Rogue Fab bender with this sweet custom grind hard wrap. Yeah, so this is our Rogue Fab bender. We've had it since basically the very beginning of grind hard, and it's always worked perfectly and done everything we've needed it to do. But yeah, it's really simple, easy to use, works great, makes nice bends. All the things you need from a bender. First piece of chassis tacked in place. Sam's been working on the bracket that'll bolt on here onto the transmission, and this piece will end there, and then some other tubes will start at that same bracket and go back to the diff. So it won't be too long before we have this whole thing connected. Well, I'm working on tube number 2 of this chassis, and it's a somewhat ambitious bend because I've got to bend here, 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 and then it's going to bend somewhere in here. It's going to bend out and then go straight back and tie into these upper A-arms right about there. So a lot of bends at a lot of different angles to get right. And getting it right once is one thing, but you know, hopefully I can get it right twice so that they match. And for that reason, I'm writing down a bunch of random information about every bend on the chassis here. So that'll look cool when it's all done. It'll just be the whole thing will just be covered in scribbles. trike is coming together, one tube at a time. This tube here turned out surprisingly well for having 5 different bends on a few different planes. Took a while to get it fit just right in terms of the notch here up front and the angle at the back and the notch here into this plate that Sam made yesterday. This still isn't aligned exactly perfectly because I don't have the part to make that bit yet, but there's still a lot of flex in it so we can move it around to get it where it needs to go. The one thing I'm not entirely sure about is travel. I don't know how far up this axle will come at max suspension travel, but probably not, well, obviously it won't come past that because it can't. Hopefully it won't hit that, but I can always just limit the travel to that because, you know, that's less than halfway out the axle. So, you know, that 3 inches or whatever of travel there would equal like 6 inches or something at the wheel end. So it should be okay there. So another reason for making this tube all one piece that I haven't mentioned yet is that I'm gonna go with my frame rail coolant tube concept again on this build because I don't want the radiator up front. It'd be vulnerable and it'd look stupid and there's already not much clearance between the tire and the engine. But it needs to be a sizable radiator, so probably put it back here behind the seat somewhere. And so we need to run the coolant all the way back there and all the way back up to the engine. So I'll probably plumb into this frame rail somewhere up here near the water pump. And it'll pump the water through it, back to the radiator, back up the other side, and there'll be some weird hose to get back because both the outlets are on this side. But it'll also have the benefit of adding a lot of volume to the cooling system. So I got the electric hydraulic conversion all installed and filled with oil and working, and it's amazing. It's awesome. It's so quiet. Also, it's on right now. It doesn't make any noise when it's just sitting there, and it's way faster. Check this out.
Wow.
Yeah, and as a bonus, the air compressor doesn't kick on halfway through and get super noisy. So, yeah.
That is so cool.
So much better. Enormous upgrade.
Ghost.
Random stuff avalanche.
Ghost in the garage. Ghost of Grindhard's past.
Huge upgrade on the bender. Huge thanks to Rogue Fab for that and for making sweet tools.
Is that what I think it is?
Well, I don't know. What do you think it is? Oh,
a plumbing tool.
A pipe wrench. Yes. Yes, it is. Today we are using a pipe wrench on a pipe. Like a real plumber would. But, you know, in this case I was just using it to twist this tube a little bit to get it lined up better. I'm going to make some brackets here to support the front of the engine off of this part of the frame. I mean, they'll kind of be supporting each other, but I think I'm going to go to this spacer here, which is conveniently already there, so I can weld to that. It uses this alternator bolt onto the water pump, and then on this side there's a bracket where the engine hoist point is that's pretty sturdy. So. So got some front engine mount brackets done here. I'll probably reinforce them in other ways later, but that'll hold it together for now. So the next thing is to get the rest of this suspension mounted to something, because right now it's pretty floppy. Doing a little 180-degree bend for a little hoop part of the frame, and just ran this out, reset, and now I'm on the second reset. Pretty dang simple. Run the ram back. Away we go to 180. 180 degrees. Bingo, bling bling. Bingo. There'll be a plate that bolts to the original mounting point on the transmission here. It'll go to this. And then from here, there'll be 2 bars that come back to this other bar for some extra strength and extra mount points for the suspension. Well, it's far from complete, but I want to see how it does on its own weight, so we're about to find out. We took out all the jack stands, and now I'm going to lower it and see if it falls apart.
Those forks have never had weight like this before.
Nope.
Hey, that's not bad.
I got this hoop welded in last night, or tacked in. So now I can make some bars that go from that hoop back to here and tie in with this suspension point, and then that'll, you know, all sorts of other stuff can mount to those tubes. And that'll make it way more rigid. Also right now the back is just being held up by the stiffness of the bushings. There's no shocks in there at all, so, you know, that's sagging a little bit. But yeah, it's on its own weight. It's a drift trike. It rolls.
Yeah.
It's the bare minimum of a rolling chassis. You know, as we always do, testing things way before they're ready. That's the floppiest chassis I've ever seen. It's that much, like, let's see what happens if I just give it a little, oh yeah, okay. So sitting there, it's like that. We can get significantly stiffer springs for those forks. So last night I also got this hoop in, and that supports these lower control arms here. I've got some brackets tacked onto there. You know, so that's holding everything in the right orientation now. I'll eventually make a mount for the diff, but first I need to make the adapter here, and we're waiting on the part for that. But because right now you can just move the diff around a little bit because of the flex, and then if we unbolted it from this rear plate, which this is going away very soon, it's just still holding everything together. But once we get this part, I can get the diff located with that and nice and straight, and then I'll make the mounts for it. Yeah, exciting times. We have a rolling chassis of the world's first 13B drift trike. Also, next week we will be back on the 2J mower. We're just waiting for one more part to rebuild the engine, and then we'll finish rebuilding that, get it all in there. So never fear, we are still working on the mower.